So whilst we're seeing tons of innovation in some of the key employee processes, reward and recognition can often be put in the too difficult box. Recognition efforts often lack differentiation, can be a bit vanilla, one size fits all. And with flexible benefit packages, meant to deliver choice, they can often just feel really overwhelming and unclear to employees. And that's why I think today's conversation is going to be so refreshing. Rachel Richards, Reward and People Operations Director at Virgin Group, has joined me to share how Virgin Group has broken away from the usual reward and recognition script. And we're going to have a look at their new benefits arrangements, but more also how they've made them much more meaningful, clear, and truly relevant. So big welcome, Rachel, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Lucy. Lovely to be here. And hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
So, Rachel, for those who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about your career journey and your role at Virgin Group today?
Absolutely. So I started out my career kind of in the early days as a generalist. I really wanted to go and spend time with people across all the different sort of elements.
HR business partnering?
Yeah, did a bit about HR business partnering. Started out in retail and hospitality, which is both a load of fun, but also you really get to work closely, don't you, with a whole range of different folks. And I had some really great leaders to work with. So that was a kind of wonderful start to my career.
I think retail experiences can be fantastic. I hear, I've never worked in retail myself, but a lot of our clients are in retail and they talk about the fact that it's very immediate, it's very fast paced, and you can really see the impact you're having very quickly.
And the impact that our people then have on customers is a really
Exactly.
cool and rewarding place to be. Absolutely. So I started out there, and then my first taste of the sort of the Virgin brand was at Virgin Atlantic. So again, I was kind of excited about sort of the opportunity. The airline was just magical to me.
Yeah.
So I was there for about 6 years, and I again started there fairly generalist, and I got the opportunity to sort of grow into a few new areas. So I again spent more time in reward, in people operations, and then some of our sort of people tech and analytics work. So again, loads of breadth, loads to learn, and then I left towards the end of the pandemic. So I kind of had a natural sort of step back from the Virgin Group, went back and spent some more time in retail. It's a bit of a theme. Spent time dabbling with sort of pharmaceutical, with consumer healthcare. And then about 2.5 years ago, again, there was an opportunity to come back to Virgin, but this time in a group role. And again, to sort of shape the sort of reward and ops and sort of tech agendas here. And there's a really sort of magnetic pull for me about the Virgin environment, just the energy and sort of the people experience that you get to create here. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for the last couple of years to be back here.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And let's start looking at the benefits that you announced relatively recently. What was the kind of the spark for Virgin Group deciding to take a fresh look at your benefits that you were offering?
Well, I suppose we were in a pretty positive starting place. So there was nothing in our benefits that was sort of on fire or really broken. Our goal has always been to be sort of cost neutral. So there wasn't a sort of cost platform that we were focused on. But they had sort of been built up over many years, and probably as quite discrete elements. So there were some elements that were really innovative and really progressive. So again, things like launching unlimited leave for the first time, like really proud of that. And they felt really kind of true to Virgin's quite sort of disruptive DNA, whereas there were other bits that were perhaps a bit less so. And then when you sort of stood back and looked at it as a total package, it just didn't make much sense as a whole.
I think that's such an important point. Whenever I've been involved with reward, it tends to be done on an incremental basis, either adding or if you're unlucky enough because of financial pressures, you're taking away things. But very rarely do we take that overview, that step back and really think about the offering in the round. So there was a mix of offering, a mix of benefits in there that made you think, actually, maybe this is the time to take a fresh look at it. Was there any other drivers?
Well, I think my observation, again, it's the beauty of being able to come in with slightly fresh eyes, but I noticed that there were a number of our benefits that had very, very low uptake. So it was about a quarter of our total package that was sort of based on a for everybody, sort of per person per month type model, but had about actually less than 5% uptake on a lot of them. So I just felt like we were spreading ourselves really thin, but actually for quite limited impact in terms of the number of people that were actually enjoying and using that combination of things. And then when you really dug into the data about who was using what, you really noticed that there were certain benefits that were clearly more attractive or more accessible to folks who were longer tenured or had more disposable income. They might be higher earners, they might be more senior. There's some barriers, so things like sort of length of service criteria. And again, we were sort of thoughtful about, actually, is that inclusive enough? Is that really offering enough breadth for enough people for the money that we're spending?
Yeah, brilliant. So let's just have a look. Just give me a kind of an overview of some of the key elements of the benefit package that you're now offering.
So again, our focus has been on how do you create a whole package that is there for sort of people's whole life, rather than having one or two really kind of hero products. So again, we've divided up our offering again to sort of try and reflect people's whole lives. So it's everything from sort of healthy and feeling good to kind of how they go and support their crew, kind of you and your crew, being there for the tough times, but also sort of the more joyous elements of benefits. I also think we often can anchor to the really sort of tough end of things versus actually planning for life after Virgin. Like, that should be a really exciting aspiration, and enjoying life and having things that give you joy and help you be at your best. And so we were sort of thinking about how do you create something that has all of those elements. And again, it's got some of the touches that we're super proud of already, like our unlimited annual leave, but we've also been experimenting with things like our Screw It, Let's Do It part, which is, again, a more flexible element for people to spend on the things that bring them joy, on the things that help them be their best. So a good kind of mixture of time off, actual support, and then just, again, how do you actually create space for people to enjoy the life they're living?
So we'll dive into some of the specifics in a moment, but I wanted to just really touch on the way in which you develop this package, because in talking to you a little while ago, you were saying that you felt it was important to involve employees in the design, and you wanted to involve them from the outset. So how did you go about doing that?
So I think we're really lucky here that we have some folk who are pretty radical thinkers. They're pretty creative, but they're also smart, bright people. So, you know, these are people that run very, very complicated lives and households outside of work. They're adults, and so why wouldn't they be able to approach something like a benefits review with the same spirit? So we thought very consciously, we're not going to use representative groups. We're not going to use sort of samples and surveys. We're going to try and create space for every single colleague to have an input of some kind. And ultimately, they were the ones that helped shape the package rather than our executive team. So we sort of split it into three sort of main chunks of engagement. We started off with a sort of week-long campaign that was all about sort of setting context. It was about sort of challenging some of our own assumptions about what people love, what people hate, what are their kind of big dreams. So that was deliberately quite broad, quite a bit of sort of focus groups and deep dives and sort of bolder ideas.
So really going for this mix of kind of quantitative and qualitative data, which is great.
Yeah. So we got a good kind of sample of where our people's minds were at. And then we took that away and we crunched it. And then we came back and did a second week-long campaign. And this one, which was the sort of the moment to be a bit brave, which was to share what we'd heard and lay it all out there. So go and publish things like our data, publish where there were differences of opinion. There was some quite emotive kind of decisions about what we should prioritise, where we should put our money, what we should stop doing.
Because it's so personal reward, isn't it? You know, it could be about your life stage, it could be about your gender, it could be about what you enjoy. Everybody's got their own little personal profile. So trying to find something that meets all those needs, but then doesn't spread you too thin. As you say, it is always going to involve choices, and that becomes trickier.
And so we went and said, okay, well, so these are the trade-offs that we're making behind closed doors, right? We are making them. So do we do X or do we do Y? And we know that neither one's going to be perfect for everybody, but we want you to at least have the opportunity to tell us how strongly you agree with some of those sort of more philosophical choices before we make them. So it was just really helpful that by the time that we were sort of getting into sort of proposals that were forming, people could see them coming a mile off. They knew exactly where, and again, felt that it had been more than just a sort of tokenistic, what would you like to see? We've already decided. But
yeah, it's not that pretend consultation, it's genuine engagement and involvement.
Yeah.
I think this point, and you know where disruptive HR comes from. It's all about treating people as grown-ups, treating people as adults. And when I look back at work that I did in one organization around pension reform, and I think back and I kind of, oh God, it's like hideous memory, because we just treated them in such a childlike way. We had a big deficit in the pension fund, but instead of just sharing the problem and engaging them in solutions, we thought, oh no, they'll panic. If we go to them with a problem but without all the solutions, then they'll panic and they'll be fearful. But of course, actually, it was the wrong thing to do. It's far better to share the dilemma, get them involved in it, rather than trying to sell them something that they think that they haven't been consulted on.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
Right, let's have a little look and perhaps take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the perhaps more innovative elements and the thinking behind it. And let's start with loved ones leave. What can you tell us about that element?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, Lucy. I'm really, really proud of our loved ones leave. So we're noticing quite an interesting demographic shift within our team here. And so for the first time for us, the number of people who've shared that they identify as having caring responsibilities has overtaken the number of people who identify as working parents. So we have a sort of shift. It's about a third now that feel they have some sort of role to play in care, whereas it's about a quarter who are working parents. And the disparity between what we were offering those two groups was really quite stark. We had some very generous sort of parental leave benefits and a very, very limited offer.
And that follows the general demographic, which I think is absolutely fascinating, that there are more people with caring for elderly relatives or family members, siblings, etc., than there are people who are caring for children. And, that's just a huge stat.
Yeah, and the sandwich generation who are having to do both, and so are very,
Yes.
very well catered for at parts of their lives and not as well catered for in others. And so we we'd been through and we did our usual sort of look at what the different entitlements are for the different things, and just thought, you know what, no, whether the world is ready for it or not, ultimately, if the people that you love, your real loved ones, you need to take time away to go and manage a sort of major life transition, whether that is putting long-term care in place or setting up a new care arrangement. Actually, we're really proud to have sort of come up with what we think is a kind of UK first of loved ones leave, which is designed to provide all of our team members kind of equal market-leading paid leave. And the spirit is that they can go and manage those transitions, whether it's a new child, whether it's a parent, it's a partner, it's a sibling, it's a grandparent, it doesn't really matter. Again, ultimately, we want to be there to go and enable people to take the space they need to put in place the right.
And I just think that's so positive, because there is sometimes this sense that HR teams need to just keep adding in and yet another group that they hadn't mentioned specifically, whether it's adoption leave or IVF leave or whatever it might be. And so you end up with a huge long list, but you're always going to forget someone. So I just love the way you've gone with this kind of broader principle of loved ones leave. And I'm also really interested, you mentioned that it's been around for a while, the unlimited annual leave and the uncapped bereavement, which are obviously two different sides, but of the same coin, in that there has been a tendency, hasn't there, to specify how many days you have off because you're going through some terrible bereavement. And equally, we've not trusted people to manage their own leave and their annual leave. So, I just wonder, could you just describe how it works with you, unlimited and uncapped, unlimited annual leave and uncapped bereavement, and just describe how it works for you, but also perhaps address some of the concerns of listeners who might be thinking about applying this and deploying it in their own organizations, but there's always that worry of what if people abuse it? Now, I know my views on this, but it would be great to hear how you at Virgin Group have kind of wrestled with this challenge and how it works for you in practice.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, really happy to do that. And I recognise that again before I joined Virgin. I sort of thought, how does that really work? Like, really? Yeah. But actually, what we find is, again, our people don't leave their brains at the door the minute they start work. You know, we hire people that want to do great work, that want to make a contribution, and we have to trust. Again, that they can make some quite well balanced decisions. So we really emphasise this element of balance, which is, it's not just about what's right for the individual, it's about what's right for the individual, their team, and the business. And so when we're quite open about how we need to go and balance all three, and a lot of our sort of conversations are about, okay, how do we make sure that those things are in balance? We've still got to get the work done. We've still got customers to look at, but again, we've got to make sure that that's not creating unnecessary pressure on the team. But where we can say yes, we want to. And so we've been, again, sort of approaching some of our conversations in that spirit. What we are doing in the background, and again, this is quite transparent, our people know we're doing it, is we're tracking the data quite closely in the background about how people are actually using it. And our analysis doesn't suggest kind of really excessive time off, doesn't suggest abuse. And so rather than designing for the lowest common denominator, design for the majority of people that want to do the right thing, want to do great work. And if we notice a problem, again, we'll just go and share it transparently and say, this is the dilemma it's creating. We can't run a business like this. We need to review.
I think that's exactly it. And you've hit the nail on the head. It's about, instead of designing around the rogue minority who might abuse it, let's design around the majority of people that come to work, who want to do a decent job, who are going to behave decently to their colleagues. And as you say, of course, there's going to sometimes be some pressure points, but you can't resolve that through a centralised policy. I think you resolve that through conversation, don't you? And it's always struck me that if you've got someone who's going to abuse a bereavement policy, then you've hired the wrong person. So deal with the individual. If they come saying that, you know, their grandma's died for the third time this year, you know, let's deal with the individual rather than penalising the vast majority of the people that work with us. You mentioned it earlier on, and I just love this. It's kind of classic Virgin branding. Screw it, let's do it, pot. Can you just kind of share what that is and how does it work?
And it's actually aptly named by our people. The spirit of it is, again, we knew that there were going to be some fundamentals that we wanted that to be there for everybody, always sort of non-negotiable. So what we've gone and said, we do want to make sure is there's some sort of the protection benefits that give people peace of mind. There's some sort of health and wellbeing support that we think is really core to being a sort of purpose-led organisation doing right by our people. But there's going to be a whole load of other stuff where we're just never going to be all things to all people. And so we just should not try to do that. And so the spirit of the Screw It, Let's Do It pot is, it's a card. So it's a sort of virtual, I won't say the brand, but it's a virtual card that people can spend on whatever they like. So there's no receipts, there's no approvals, there's no very strict criteria for what it can and can't be spent on. Again, our people are more than capable of spending their money in their personal lives on all sorts of things. And we don't police that. And so what we're seeing people use it for a whole load of things. Quite a bit of wellbeing spent. So there's quite a lot of sort of different sort of gym and exercise classes, but there's also art lessons, language learning, holidays, therapy, Virgin points, so actually kind of getting to enjoy some of our own product and experiences, train tickets, that the whole load. So it was sort of the answer that we tried to create to, look, our people have asked for flexibility. What's actually meaningful flexibility, rather than, as you sort of said at the beginning of the conversation, sort of slightly more prescriptive flexibility.
Or the huge long shopping list of stuff that everyone just gets totally confused by.
Yeah, we've gone and said, okay, well, if people need access to whole of market, let's find a way to give them access to whole of market. And in the first 6 months, we've already seen these cards being used with hundreds of different partners, particularly on wellbeing. So it just goes to validate that we can't be all things to all people. We've chosen to do that quite differently, and it's working. People are getting the flexibility that they need, whereas we're getting in the background all of the rich insight about what's actually important to our people, and again, where could we go and create greater value for them in their package as it evolves.
So you've approached personalisation not by trying to identify what everybody wants individually, but just giving them the freedom, the flexibility to use this screw it, let's do it pot, to spend the money on the things that are important to them.
Yeah, and again, we've applied the same principle, which is that there's a please be sensible, please recognise this is the company's money. We're learning in the background, and actually we're gaining a load of insight on who our people are and what kind of how they live their lives. But if it doesn't work, we'll review together with them.
Exactly. Nothing's set in stone. I mean, flexible working is the one I wanted to go next, because it's not always seen as part of a typical reward and recognition package, but of course it has enormous value. Again, very personal in terms of what's going to work for me isn't going to work for you. It's so dependent on the nature of the work we're doing. It's very much about what our physical workspace is like at home. Where are we in our career? So many factors. But as I understand it, you do allow teams to decide where and how they work best, which always seems to me a so much more adult to adult, powerful, high impact approach than specifying you've got to be in for 3 days and out for 2, which feels that kind of old fashioned thinking. How do you make that work for you?
So again, it's this spirit of balance, isn't it, between what is right for the individual. So again, clearly we want to be able to support each team member's kind of preferred working style and sort of create an environment where people can create the balance that they need. But it also needs to work again for the team and the sort of connection and relationship of the team, as well as business needs. And so we do believe that sort of face-to-face time to connect and collaborate is really important. And so we have recently invested in our new HQ in London, which is a really beautiful space for our teams to kind of come together. And again, load of listening about and involving our people in how do we design that space in a really inclusive way. What do you actually want to use the space for? Where do you get value from being in together in person, and where do you not? What enables this blend of working to be successful both at home and in the office? And again, that sort of, again, being able to have that conversation quite openly has really helped our people sort of, again, it's getting away from sort of presenteeism and being seen, and to each team has gone and worked out a different rhythm. And our teams do have customers, and our teams do work with people internationally. They do have sort of needs that they need to meet, but actually giving them the freedom to go and work out what's the rhythm for them.
And that's the key, isn't it? Is allowing teams, empowering teams to have the conversations with themselves. And HR's role becomes less about prescribing the rules and making sure people are following them, and becomes much more about helping leaders, managers to have those conversations with their teams. And it's not about getting everything you want all the time. I think, that's what being an adult is about, isn't it? You don't always get everything you want, but you do it through conversations that are around the nature of the work, what's going to work for the other team members. And sometimes there's some tension points, but you resolve that through conversation rather than HR providing the policy on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, our people are voting with their feet. So we're also noticing that since we've opened the new office, the team attendance has actually risen in the office by about 30%. And so again, that sense of being able to sort of have some element of influence and control about how we've built it, the environment that we've created, done in a way that feels meaningful and inclusive. They want to come in and connect, but again, we've done that not by mandating, but by trying to sort of explore with them.
Fantastic. Okay, let's look at the final one that I wanted to pick out of and it is, I should say that the benefits package is broader than just the elements that I've called out, but there is a real focus on health in the new package of benefits. And there's a health inclusion fund, there's expanded access to therapy, mentoring, volunteering. Can you just talk a bit about how you arrived at that element? What was the motivation behind creating this expanded approach to health?
Where did we start? Again, we probably started that our people told us it was important to them. So not only did we, as a kind of responsible employer, want to make sure that our people are healthy and well, but they were quite specific actually about this is what it means for me to be at my best and to be able to kind of truly be myself both inside and outside of work. And so you're right, elements like mental health support, feeling like you've got the sort of protection of sort of good quality kind of health support in the background, really important to them. But again, we were quite open, and there's this tension where sometimes there won't be the sort of perfectly available sort of traditional healthcare product that's going to meet every single need, and there is going to be kind of cases and situations and people that might fall between the cracks. And so that was the spirit and the sort of nucleus of the Health Inclusion Fund, which was, again, how do you go and create a mechanism for people to come and talk to us if they don't feel that their needs are being met, and that we actually have a structure and way to sort of equitably get people the help that they need. And again, sort of, you talked about things like mentoring and volunteering. Again, those are elements that our people are asking to do more of. And so again, if we can facilitate that, that's really easy to do. Why wouldn't we want to give them space and opportunity to do more of that? So again, but some of it's just too overwhelming. So things like volunteering is wonderful if you know exactly what you'd like to do and you've got a cause that you really care about. But we've also tried to sort of create some packages and some sort of micro things that actually, if you don't know where to start, but you can give an hour, we could go do this. And if you don't quite know where to start, but you could use your voice for this, again, we've tried to give people a bit of a springboard.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's actually not just about providing the benefit, it's also signposting and curating options for people.
It's a bit of a menu that, again, have been picked by our community team that we keep going and refreshing based on where we know people are getting a lot of value and fulfillment out of starting there.
So you've involved employees from the outset. You're making sure that you continue to review and refine based on the data that you're getting. How have they responded so far? Any stories or feedback that stuck with you?
Lots of feedback from our people, not all positive. There's, again, a whole spectrum of feedback in there, but that's okay. We were expecting that. Which ones are the ones that stuck with me? Which ones am I really proud of? I'm super proud, actually. Again, people don't love to sort of start with pensions, but I will start with pensions because, again, it's an area where you typically get quite low engagement, isn't it? And you get some apathy of people making choices about kind of planning for their life after Virgin. And so we have got now to a place where 90%, at least 90%, slightly over, of our people are saving more than the recommended level for a kind of good standard of living in retirement.
That's great.
That was a sort of goal that we were trying to agitate for. Again, how do you use this as a moment to get people really thinking about, is this going to be enough for me? And sort of making some changes, not just to our investment, but in the way that we got people talking and thinking about it. Really proud of that. We've got about 75% of our team that are using their Script Let's Do It pot. So again, we're seeing that actually that's got good breadth. We've seen a sort of top quartile EMPS for benefits. And again, that's something that we're going and tracking regularly, the sentiment around what's working, what's not.
Yeah, because employee net promoter score of benefits packages usually comes out around -15.
Yeah.
So that's really, I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, it's one of those things that you don't tend to, you just kind of think, well, this is what it is. You don't tend to recommend it or be particularly positive about it. So to be getting great scores on that is really positive.
Thank you.
So people listening who might be either in a reward and recognition role, or maybe business leaders, or maybe generalist HR that might have an influence on the reward piece. What advice would you give them if they wanted to make their rewards more relevant, more compelling, but without spending more?
Where would I encourage people to start? So definitely starting with sort of change is a team effort. And got to decide quite early on, if you really meaningfully, you do mean it, that you want to go and involve people through making changes.
Yeah, I think you're right. That authenticity around that is so important. We've all done it, the pretend consultation. So being genuine and authentic about engagement and not going in there with preconceived ideas.
And then I think there was a real moment of courage to just be brave and be more transparent. So if you're really trying to set the groundwork for people to make great, sensible decisions and have good debates about trade-offs, that they need access to some of the stuff that you've got. So they need access to some of the data you can see, the benchmarking you're looking at. Actually, when some of the decisions are a bit more emotive, actually it it takes real bravery, doesn't it, to keep talking even when it's hard, and keep talking and reflecting that there are some quite polarized points of view and they're all valid. How do you sort of facilitate that in a way that means that they get heard, but again that you sort of set the right sort of framework that this isn't going to please. Actually, people seeing almost that play out is quite helpful to you. So we were really there was some scary moments of sort of things like sharing our constraints up front. We were very clear about, it needs to be cost neutral. There is not more money, so we have to make choices. It has to be digital first. We are an organisation that can't cater in a different way. It needs to be an offer that a small reward team can actually deliver. So there's stuff we would love to do, but it's actually got to be practical and operationalisable.
I would imagine, though, the majority of people are very positive about that.
Yeah, they're not really constrained. I think
it's refreshing. It's refreshing to get the data, to get the insights, to have the honesty. I think when people feel that we're potentially being a bit disingenuous, or they haven't got the whole picture, that's when they can react badly. But so yes, you're right. It takes courage. The thing I would also add, which you haven't perhaps mentioned this a lot, but is that it's very on brand as well. And I think that so many reward and recognition packages that I see within organizations are just so vanilla, and they don't differentiate you. And yet there's things that you really could be doing. I mean, one that springs to mind is Patagonia. Their brand is all about, the great outdoors and healthy living and being eco-friendly, and their range of benefits, some really interesting things like, paid time off to go and exercise, 3-day weekends so that you can travel. And even they'll pay your bail if you're arrested on climate activism. Now, that's not going to work for everybody, but what I love is that they're brave enough to say, this is who we are. We've thought about our reward and recognition in the context of the brand and making sure that it's aligned. And it feels to me that not just the language and the marketing, but the kind of the elements of it as well feels very virgin.
Thank you. And we've not also got the monopoly on amazing benefits. That there are a load of organisations that do some really progressive, really creative things.
Absolutely.
They're only as good as if your people are excited about them and think they're relevant and useful.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, look, let's wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rachel. If there's any listeners who perhaps wanted to contact you to follow up, what's the best way of reaching you? We'll make sure that whatever you tell us goes into the show notes.
So probably LinkedIn's the easiest. So again, if you wanted to connect with me or share some of what you're doing, I'd love to share ideas. It's Rachel Richards.
We'll make sure your LinkedIn URL goes into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me, Rachel, and good luck with it all.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. To get more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications.